Once we have the buster sword sprayed evenly with the putty, around 2 to 3 layers on each side, on the flat part, on the sides, we can sand them. And I'm going to use around 120 to 180 grit sandpaper, so we're going to start out pretty rough. And I'm going to be using wet sandpaper, so we could do it underwater. Now the reason I'm going to do it in water is because it's much easier to contain all the dirt and just wash it away. However, if you have all the electronics inside there, you need to be very, very cautious just not to get them wet. So if you do that, do make sure it's contained and nicely waterproof. So as you can see, we have sprayed it pretty evenly, and it does really bring out all the seams. So once we actually have them sanded, it's going to bring out all the flaws and then to get rid of them. Like this one, for example, we can see the seam is actually still slight gap, so after we sand it down, we may have to fill it a bit more. So this is why we do this process, to make sure we get it as seamless as possible. Okay, so my working area is a bit strange. I'm going to do it in the bathroom because I don't really have a workshop. Okay, so I have 2 sanding blocks. I have 120 grit and I have 240 grit. So this is the waterproof sandpaper that I have. This is 120 grit. And I'm using these sand blocks. These are 3M sand blocks. And I do advise using them over your hands alone, because with hands, the surface can get uneven as your fingers are quite squishy. The surface is going to get uneven and it's going to cause imperfections, so I really do advise using a sand block. So we're going to leave the 240 grit for later, for the final stages, but for now, as we want to remove all the imperfections, all these seams, we're going to start with 120 grit. So make sure your working area is quite suitable. This is the best I got, so I'm going to use what I have. Make sure to have a waterproof sandpaper, because if you don't, the sandpaper will just disintegrate eventually. So if you have waterproof sandpaper, it's going to last much longer. This will last me a good few sessions, so this will be perfect for me. So I just dip in the water, get it wet, and you're just literally going to start scrubbing back and forth. Don't put too much pressure, because these buster swords have rather low infill density, which means the inside isn't that thick. This is just to make it really light so you can wield it. So don't put all your weight on it, just slight pressure. And you want to focus on the seams. Since the main segment is actually really, really neat, just focus on the seams more. Like that. And every now and then just dip it into the water, into the bucket. With one hand, just make sure it doesn't move back and forth. You are going to make a mess, by the way, so make sure all your working surroundings can get a bit messy, and then just mop it up after. And you can judge the seams the best. The way I do is with my fingers, because you won't get to see how perfect it is until another layer of putty is actually on. So it's best to feel with your fingers. Now for these areas, they're different levels, so you want to be rather careful how you handle this. So just hold it like this. Now for this area, for the actual blade segment, have the side go into the groove, so it doesn't actually get rid of the groove. You don't want to sand here. You want to sand on the edge, so it doesn't get rid of that curve. You don't want to create a curve. You want that nice transition. if you want to reveal what's going on, just get a cup and just pour the water on, just to see what's going on underneath a bit better, because all that putty is going to start building up. Now the putty is all dry, so it's okay, but we do want to move it so we can actually see what's going on. And again, feel with your finger for the transition lines. If they're quite prominent, then work more on that area. Also, the direction that we're sanding in doesn't matter too much, because it's 120 grit and that will get filled in with the putty anyway, because once we sanded this once, we're going to have to do the putty again. Here, this is quite prominent, so it needs quite a lot more sanding here. Another reason why we're doing this underwater is because all that scrubbing, all that sandpaper work generates quite a lot of heat. Now keep in mind, we're working with filament, and this filament is susceptible to high heat. So if we start rubbing a lot and generating a lot of heat, that may start to induce some warping. So this is another really good thing about using water. I'm using cold water, by the way. It has no chance of warping really under cold water. If you're getting bored of doing one side, just flip it over and work on the other side. But you may want to just give it a run of some water just to clear it up and see what's going on. Again, be very mindful of the electronics. I haven't got to that section, so it hasn't even got wet really, just about this area, but you may have to come up with a way how to protect your electronics. You could even dry the sander if you wanted to, if you're really concerned about it and just want to make sure it doesn't get wet.